He stood there in his janitor's uniform, mop in hand, as the CEO laughter echoed through the marble lobby. The cameras were rolling. Thousands were watching live, and Marcus Chen, the billionaire CEO of Chen Industries, had just made the biggest mistake of his career. What happened next would shake the entire corporate world and teach one man a lesson he would never forget. But before we get to that moment that changed everything, you need to understand how we got here. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from New York, London, Toronto, or somewhere else entirely? Drop your city in the comments right now. And if you want to hear more stories about justice, karma, and people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you won't believe where this story goes. She adjusted the microphone clipped to her blazer and smiled at the camera. Rebecca Chen, the lead business correspondent for National Business Network, had been preparing for this interview for weeks. Marcus Chen, her distant cousin by marriage and the CEO of Chen Industries, was finally agreeing to a live interview at the company's headquarters in downtown Chicago. The timing was perfect. Chen Industries had just announced record profits for the third consecutive quarter, and Marcus was riding high on success. The lobby of Chen Industries was everything you would expect from a billion-dollar corporation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. Modern art installations worth millions lined the walls. The marble floors gleamed under designer lighting fixtures that probably cost more than most people's cars. Everything screamed money, power, and prestige. Rebecca's camera crew had arrived at 6 in the morning to set up. They positioned cameras at 3 different angles to capture every moment of what was supposed to be a triumphant interview. The segment was scheduled to air live at 9 o'clock, right during the morning rush when millions of professionals would be tuning in during their commutes or from their offices. Marcus Chen had built Chen Industries from a small tech startup into a multinational corporation worth over $3 billion. He was 42 years old, Harvard-educated, and known in business circles as a ruthless negotiator who never lost a deal. Forbes had recently featured him in their 40 Under 50 issue, calling him one of the most influential Asian American business leaders in the country. But Marcus had a reputation for something else too. Former employees whispered about his treatment of staff. There were stories, unconfirmed but persistent, about how he spoke to people he considered beneath him. Several lawsuits had been quietly settled out of court. Non-disclosure agreements kept the details buried. The Human Resources Department had a revolving door, and Glassdoor reviews painted a picture of a toxic workplace culture that started at the top. None of that would be part of today's interview, of course. Rebecca had her talking points approved by Marcus's public relations team. They would discuss innovation, market expansion, the company's new artificial intelligence division, and Marcus's vision for the future. It was supposed to be a puff piece, the kind of free publicity that CEO dream about. At 7:30 in the morning, while Rebecca reviewed her notes, a man entered the lobby through a side entrance. He wore a dark blue janitor's uniform with a name tag that read James. He was black, probably in his late 50s or early 60s, with gray hair trimmed close to his scalp and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He pushed a yellow cleaning cart loaded with supplies and began his morning routine of wiping down the windows and polishing the marble floors. James moved quietly and efficiently, the way someone does when they've perfected their routine over many years. He nodded politely to the camera crew when he passed them, careful not to disturb their equipment setup. One of the production assistants, a young woman named Sarah, smiled back at him and said good morning. James returned the greeting with a warm smile that reached his eyes. "Been working here long?" Sarah asked, making conversation while the lighting crew adjusted their equipment. "First week, actually," James replied, wringing out his mop. "Still learning where everything is." "Well, welcome to the chaos," Sarah laughed. "We're doing a live interview this morning with the CEO, so things might get a little hectic." James nodded and continued his work, moving methodically around the perimeter of the lobby. He seemed completely at ease, humming softly to himself as he cleaned. There was something almost dignified about the way he worked, taking pride in making sure every surface sparkled. At 8:40, 5. Marcus Chen emerged from the executive elevator. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit that probably cost $5,000. His shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. His hair was styled perfectly, not a strand out of place. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, someone who had spent his entire adult life being the most important person in every room he entered. "Rebecca," he said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good to see you. Thanks for coming out." "Wouldn't miss it, Marcus," she replied, shaking his hand professionally. "This is going to be great exposure for the company." They spent the next 10 minutes going over last-minute details. The makeup artist touched up Marcus's face for the cameras. The audio technician checked his microphone levels. Rebecca reviewed her questions one final time, though she had them memorized. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. At 8:55, 5 minutes before going live, Marcus noticed James for the first time. The janitor was near one of the large windows, carefully wiping down the glass to remove any streaks or smudges. He was focused on his work, paying no attention to the interview preparation happening behind him. Marcus's expression changed. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He leaned toward Rebecca and spoke in a voice that was meant to be quiet, but carried further than he intended. "Can someone get that janitor out of here? We're about to go live. I don't want him in the background of the shot." Rebecca glanced at James, then back at Marcus. "I'm sure he'll be done in just a minute. We've got 5 minutes before. I don't care." Marcus interrupted, his voice taking on an edge. "This is a professional broadcast about a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't need the help cluttering up the background. Someone remove him, now." The production assistant, Sarah, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, he's just doing his job. He'll be out of the way before. Did I ask for your opinion?" Marcus snapped at her. "Get him out of the shot or get someone who will." James had heard every word. It was impossible not to hear when someone was talking about you like you weren't there, like you were an object to be moved rather than a person. He straightened up from his work, turned slowly, and looked directly at Marcus Chen. "I'll just finish this window and be out of your way," James said calmly, with no hint of anger or resentment in his voice. His tone was polite, professional, exactly what you would expect from someone who took pride in doing their job well. Marcus looked at James as if seeing him for the first time, really seeing him. And what Marcus saw was exactly what he expected to see. Someone he considered beneath him, someone who didn't matter, someone whose feelings and dignity were irrelevant compared to his important business interview. "You'll leave now?" Marcus said flatly. "Not when you're finished. Now, this is my building, and I'm telling you to leave." Rebecca's eyes widened. The camera crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Everyone could feel the tension crackling in the air, the casual cruelty that was being delivered in such matter-of-fact tones. James set down his cleaning cloth carefully. He removed his gloves and placed them on his cart. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a subservient smile, not an angry smile, but something else entirely. Something that should have been Marcus's first warning that this situation was not what it appeared to be. "Mr. Chen," James said quietly, "I understand you're preparing for an interview. I understand you want everything to be perfect, but I'm going to stand right here for just a moment longer because there's something you need to hear." "I don't need to hear anything from you," Marcus shot back. "Security? Can someone call security?" "Security won't be necessary," James replied, his voice still calm, still measured. "Because in about 60 seconds, we're going to have a very different conversation than the one you're planning to have with this reporter." Marcus laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind of laugh that was meant to humiliate, to put someone in their place. "Are you threatening me? Do you have any idea who I am? I could have you not just fired but blacklisted from every building in this city. You'll be lucky to get a job cleaning toilets at a gas station when I'm done with you. Is that right?" James asked, and there was something in his tone now, a subtle shift that made Rebecca's reporter instincts suddenly fire on all cylinders. Something was happening here, something bigger than a CEO being rude to a janitor. That's exactly right, Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to the change in atmosphere that everyone else was starting to sense. You people need to learn your place. I've worked my entire life to build this company. You push a mop around for minimum wage. We are not the same. We will never be the same. So when I tell you to leave, you leave. It's that simple. The cameras were still rolling. The crew had been doing test recordings to check their equipment, which meant everything was being captured, every word, every sneer, every moment of Marcus Chen revealing exactly who he was when he thought there would be no consequences. James reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately. He pulled out not a weapon, not a threat, but a wallet. From the wallet, he extracted a business card and held it out toward Marcus. "Why don't you read this?" James suggested. Marcus didn't take the card. He barely glanced at it. "I don't need to read anything from you. Rebecca, are we doing this interview or not? Because if this person doesn't leave immediately, we're rescheduling." "Marcus," Rebecca said carefully, her reporter instincts now screaming at her that she was watching a story unfold in real time. "Maybe you should look at the card." "I'm not looking at anything from the help," Marcus snapped. "This is ridiculous. In 30 seconds, I'm calling the police and having him arrested for trespassing." James set the business card down on the reception desk. "You should probably look at it before you make that call," he said. "Because trespassing is an interesting charge to file against someone who owns the property." The lobby went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that marble floor. Marcus's expression began to change, confusion replacing contempt. Rebecca leaned forward, her professional instincts telling her to pay very close attention to whatever was about to happen. "What did you just say?" Marcus asked slowly. "I said," James repeated calmly, "that it's difficult to trespass on property you own. But please, continue with your threats. Continue telling me about how you're going to have me blacklisted and ensure I never work again. I'm fascinated to hear more about your plans." Marcus finally picked up the business card. As he read it, the color drained from his face. His hand began to shake almost imperceptibly. He looked up at James, then back down at the card, then up at James again. The card read, James Robert Mitchell Roman, 3, Chairman and CEO, Mitchell Capital Holdings. Rebecca, standing close enough to see the card, audibly gasped. Sarah, the production assistant who had been kind to James earlier, looked confused. But the senior cameraman, a man named Don who had been in the business for 30 years, immediately understood the magnitude of what was unfolding. "Oh my God," Don whispered, "Mitchell Capital Holdings. They're the investment firm that owns 48% of Chen Industries." James finished for him. "As of 8 o'clock this morning, we completed the acquisition of an additional 7% stake from a block of minority shareholders who were, how should I put this, dissatisfied with the company's leadership and direction. That brings our total ownership to 55%. We are now the majority shareholder." Marcus stood frozen, the business card still in his hand. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His entire world was reorienting itself in real time, and he couldn't process it fast enough. "That's not possible," he finally managed. "I would have been notified. The board would have told me. There are procedures. There are indeed procedures." James agreed, and we followed all of them. The paperwork was filed with the SEC at 7 this morning. Your board of directors received formal notification at 7:30. I believe several of them tried to reach you, but you were apparently too focused on preparing for this interview to check your messages. Marcus fumbled for his phone. He pulled it out with shaking hands and saw, indeed, a string of urgent messages and missed calls from board members, from his chief legal counsel, from his chief financial officer. 13 missed calls in the last hour. He had silenced his phone for the interview. "I came here this morning," James continued, his voice still calm but carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore, "because I believe in seeing things from the ground up. I wanted to understand this company from the perspective of the people who keep it running every single day, the people you apparently think of as beneath you, the people whose dignity and humanity you dismiss without a second thought. This is a setup, Marcus said, his voice rising. This is some kind of ambush. Rebecca, are you in on this? Is this what this interview was really about? Rebecca held up both hands. I had no idea. Marcus, I swear, I had absolutely no idea. She didn't know. James confirmed. No one knew except my team, and, as of this morning, your board of directors. I wanted to see the real Chen Industries, not the version you show to reporters and investors, the real version, the one where you treat people like they're disposable, and you certainly didn't disappoint. Marcus's shock was beginning to transform into anger. You had no right to do this. You come in here under false pretenses, lying about who you are. I never lied about anything. James interrupted gently. You assumed. You saw a black man in a janitor's uniform and made every assumption you needed to make to justify treating me like I wasn't fully human. I told your production assistant this was my first week. That was true. It's my first week as majority owner of this company. I told her I was still learning where everything is. Also true. I'm learning where all the problems are in this organization, and I found the biggest problem within 15 minutes of walking through the door. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I have a contract. I have employment agreements. You can't just walk in and take over. I'm not taking over, James replied. Mitchell Capital Holdings is taking over because we now own the majority stake in this company. As for your contract, I'm sure our lawyers will be reviewing it very carefully. But contracts tend to have clauses about conduct unbecoming of an officer of the company, don't they? Clauses about behavior that damages the company's reputation or creates liability. He gestured to the cameras that had been recording everything. And speaking of which, we have quite a bit of footage now of the CEO of Chen Industries demonstrating exactly the kind of toxic leadership that has led to 3 separate discrimination lawsuits in the past 18 months. Lawsuits that your public relations team worked very hard to keep quiet. Lawsuits that cost the company millions in settlements. Lawsuits that made me and my partners at Mitchell Capital very interested in what was really happening here. Rebecca, her journalistic instincts now fully engaged, stepped forward with her microphone. Mr. Mitchell, can I ask you some questions? This is an incredible development. You can. James said, but not as part of whatever puff piece was scheduled for this morning. If you want to do a real story about what we found when we investigated Chen Industries, about the culture that's been allowed to fester here, about what we're going to do to change it, then yes, I'm happy to sit down for an interview, a real one, with real questions. Marcus was frantically scrolling through his phone now, reading the messages he had ignored. The board wants an emergency meeting, he muttered. They want me downtown in an hour. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. What's insane? James said, and now there was steel in his voice. Is that you thought you could treat people the way you've been treating them without consequences. What's insane is that a man with your education and resources never learned basic human decency. What's insane is that you looked at me this morning and saw nothing but someone to dismiss and discard. I didn't mean, Marcus started. Yes, you did. James cut him off. You meant every word. You meant it when you called me the help. You meant it when you said people like me need to learn our place. You meant it when you threatened to destroy my livelihood over the crime of existing in your presence while doing honest work. You meant all of it, and that's the problem. Sarah, the production assistant, had tears in her eyes. Mr. Mitchell, she said quietly, thank you for being nice to me this morning. When I said welcome to the chaos, you could have told me who you were. You could have pulled rank, but you were just kind. James turned to her and smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. Being kind doesn't cost anything, Sarah, and it tells you everything you need to know about a person, how they treat people when they think there's no benefit to being decent. You were kind to someone you thought was a janitor because that's who you are. Mr. Chen was cruel to someone he thought was a janitor because that's who he is. Marcus looked around the lobby desperately, as if searching for an escape route or perhaps hoping this was all a nightmare. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now," James said, "you go to that emergency board meeting, and you listen to what Mitchell Capital Holdings expects from the leadership of the companies we invest in. We expect excellence, yes. We expect innovation and growth and profitability, but we also expect something else. We expect humanity. We expect leaders who understand that every person who works for this company, from the executives to the janitors, deserves respect and dignity." He picked up his cleaning cart, preparing to wheel it away. "I'll be at that board meeting, by the way. As the representative of the majority shareholder, I have a seat on the board now. We have a lot to discuss about the future direction of Chen Industries and whether you're the right person to lead that future." "Are you firing me?" Marcus asked. "I'm not making that decision alone," James replied. "That's what boards are for. But I will be sharing my first impressions of the company's leadership. And my first impression is that Chen Industries has a serious culture problem that starts at the very top. We'll see what the board thinks should be done about that." Rebecca stepped forward again, her microphone ready. "Mr. Mitchell, can you tell us more about Mitchell Capital Holdings? Your company isn't as well known as some of the other major investment firms." "We prefer it that way," James said. "We're not interested in hostile takeovers or corporate raiding. We invest in companies that we believe have good fundamentals but are being held back by poor leadership or toxic culture. We acquire enough of a stake to influence change, and then we work with those companies to help them reach their potential. Chen Industries has incredible technology and talented people. It just needs leaders who know how to treat those people with respect." "How long have you been planning this?" Rebecca asked. "We've been watching Chen Industries for about 6 months," James explained. "The discrimination lawsuits caught our attention. Then we started hearing from employees, current and former, about the culture here. We did our due diligence. We talked to people at every level of the organization, and we decided that this was a company worth saving, but that it needed significant course correction. And the janitor disguise," Rebecca pressed, "was that always part of the plan? I wanted to see the company from the ground level," James said. "I wanted to understand what it's really like to work here when you're not an executive with a corner office. I learned more in one morning than I could have learned in a dozen meetings with management consultants. I learned that the culture problems we had heard about are very real, and I learned that the man at the top has no interest in changing them." Marcus had been silent during this exchange, staring at his phone as if it might provide answers or an escape route. Finally, he looked up at James with something that might have been desperation. "I built this company," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I started with nothing. I worked 8-hour days for years. I sacrificed everything to make Chen Industries what it is today. And you're going to take it away from me because of one bad moment, one mistake." "It's not one moment," James replied, not unkindly but firmly. "It's a pattern. It's who you've shown yourself to be consistently over time. The lawsuits weren't one moment. The settlements weren't one moment. The employees who left because they couldn't tolerate the toxic environment weren't one moment. This morning was just the moment when you showed your true character to the wrong person." He paused, then continued more gently. "You did build something impressive here, Mr. Chen. The technology divisions you've developed are genuinely innovative. The company has good bones, but it also has a culture that's driving away talent and exposing the company to legal liability and reputational damage. That's not sustainable, no matter how good the technology is." "So what am I supposed to do?" Marcus asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely lost rather than arrogant. "You go to the board meeting," James said. "You listen. You think very carefully about the kind of leader you want to be, and whether you're capable of making the changes that need to be made. And then the board will decide whether Chen Industries is better off with you at the helm or with someone else." The board meeting lasted 4 hours. James presented his findings from his morning at Chen Industries, along with documentation of the pattern of complaints and legal issues that had plagued the company. Marcus attempted to defend himself, to explain his actions, to promise he would do better. The board listened to both sides. In the end, they offered Marcus a choice: resign with a generous severance package and sign an agreement to never disparage the company, or face a potential termination for cause based on his documented behavior pattern. Marcus chose to resign. Within a week, Rebecca's network aired a special report about what had happened at Chen Industries. The footage from that morning went viral. Millions of people watched Marcus Chen reveal his true character, unaware that he was doing so in front of the very person who had the power to hold him accountable. The story sparked a national conversation about corporate culture, about how people in power treat those they consider beneath them, and about the importance of authentic leadership. Other companies began conducting their own culture audits, worried that they might have similar problems festering beneath polished corporate exteriors. Mitchell Capital Holdings appointed an interim CEO for Chen Industries, a woman named Dr. Patricia Williams, who had a reputation for transforming toxic workplaces into environments where people actually wanted to work. She immediately implemented new training programs, strengthened the human resources department, and established clear channels for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. 6 months later, employee satisfaction scores at Chen Industries had improved dramatically. Productivity was up, turnover was down. The company announced its best quarter in 5 years. It turned out that treating people with dignity was not just the right thing to do, it was also good for business. As for Marcus Chen, he largely disappeared from public life. There were rumors that he was working with an executive coach, trying to understand and address the behaviors that had led to his downfall. Some people said he was writing a book about leadership and hubris. Others said he had moved overseas. Whatever the truth, he was no longer the powerful CEO who thought he could treat people however he wanted without consequences. James Mitchell continued his work with Mitchell Capital Holdings, identifying companies that needed similar interventions. But he never forgot that morning in the Chen Industries lobby. He kept the janitor's uniform in his office as a reminder that how people treat service workers, how they treat anyone they perceive as having less power or status, reveals everything about their character. Sarah, the production assistant who had been kind to James, received an unexpected offer 3 months after the incident. Mitchell Capital Holdings was launching a new initiative to identify and nurture young talent in the business world, particularly people who demonstrated integrity and kindness in their everyday interactions. She was offered a position in the program with full support for completing her MBA. She accepted. The marble lobby of Chen Industries still gleams under those expensive light fixtures. The art installations still grace the walls. The floor-to-ceiling windows still overlook Lake Michigan. But something fundamental has changed in that building. People walk through those halls differently now. They speak to each other differently. The janitors, the security guards, the reception staff, they all notice the change. They feel seen and valued in ways they hadn't before. Because one morning, a powerful man laughed at a janitor and revealed his true character at precisely the wrong moment to precisely the wrong person. And that moment changed everything. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. How do you treat people when you think no one important is watching? How do you speak to the server at a restaurant, the person cleaning your office building, the cashier at the grocery store? Because here's the truth that Marcus Chen learned the hard way. Someone is always watching. Maybe not literally, but the universe has a way of balancing the scales. Karma is real, and it has a perfect memory. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own actions and how you treat people, then do me a favor. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about a time you witnessed someone showing their true character, for better or worse. And subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep bringing you stories about justice, karma, and the power of treating people with dignity and respect. Remember, it doesn't matter what you wear or what your job title is or how much money you make. What matters is how you treat other people, especially when you think there's nothing in it for you. That's what reveals who you really are, and sooner or later, who you really are will determine what happens to you. The next time you see someone in a service position, someone whose job society sometimes treats as invisible, remember James Mitchell. Remember that you never know who someone really is or what power they might have. But more importantly, remember that it shouldn't matter. You should treat people with kindness and respect because it's the right thing to do, not because they might secretly be a billionaire in disguise. That's the real lesson of this story. Not that you might get caught being cruel to someone powerful, but that cruelty itself in any form to any person diminishes us all. And kindness, genuine kindness shown to everyone regardless of their station in life, that's what makes us truly successful, truly powerful, truly human. Thanks for watching.